Morning, everyone. Today we're going to do a couple of different things today. I just want to talk to you about some of the aspects of drawing the hair. And then I'm going to talk about foreshortening and triangulation. And then we're going to just get started on the pose today. Oh, that's very helpful. Thank you. Yeah, that's very helpful. So this is a drawing done by the incredible artist. His name is Julio Reyes, and his wife is Candice Bohannon, and they're just both a powerhouse combination of great talent. And what I love about this drawing is that I wanted to kind of focus today on how artists conceive the hair. And notice that Julio has done a lot with a tonal application. Now, the interesting thing about this particular drawing is that it's done on Dura film, which is a type of treated film. I don't want to disturb the other class. It's a treated film, and then he did a combination of ink, and he did some charcoal and graphite pencil. He just uses whatever he wants. He extracts. And notice how on the hair, that really only the hair that you see that's described as hair is on the edges, so the wisps of hair. And the rest of it's very tonal. And it works as a cohesive whole because of that. Let's see. This is his wife, Candice Bohannon, and she works on paper. I just think this is a gorgeous drawing, and it has definitely a lot more of information in the hair mass, but notice how even though she's described individual hair strands, it works as a whole unit. And that's the important part about drawing the hair, is to make sure that you're describing in a 5-part plane change the hair mass and making sure that it works as a whole unit. I think this is Savannah Cuff, I'm not positive, but this is an artist out of GCA. And I put this on the demonstration to just kind of show you how another artist conceived the hair on a male figure as opposed to a female figure. And he's working on a partially toned paper, so he's starting out with a basic value 5, or she is, and I just love that. It's very descriptive, and yet, again, the detail comes on the edges. I'm not sure of this artist's name, but I thought that was a beautiful drawing, very rich, dark blacks. This is a local artist. His name's Casey Childs, and he's out of American Fork, I believe. But I love Casey's work. It's very well conceived. It's the design aspect of this drawing's beautiful. It's on pre-purchased Canson paper or Strathmore, one of the papers that is pre-toned. This isn't toned with some of the ways that I've shown you, but I think it's really beautiful because you already start out with a very strong light logic. And I think the way that he's done the hair mass is really interesting too. And again, notice how he's seeing shape within the overall block of the hair. This is Colleen Berry. I can't get it any larger than that. She also works on toned paper. She's working with that 5-part value change, and she was the one that taught me that concept. And I think this is really successful, and it has, again, the hair on the edges, but you're conceiving the darkest value, the middle dark, light dark, and then your dark light, middle dark light, light light, and then highlight. This is another Casey, no, I think this is Jeff Hine. Jeff is a local artist, and I think this is really beautiful. I think he set this drawing up with the pan pastel that some of you are experimenting with. This is an artist by the name of Greg Mortensen, and I believe this is a drawing that he did while he was at the GCA. This is, you can see a background overall tone of the paper, and then he's added to that on top of it. And I love how he's toned on top of the tone of the paper, and it's very successful. The hair becomes very atmospheric, and I think that's a beautiful way to approach hair. This is the artist of that drawing previously. This is Greg Mortensen. He is a local, he grew up in St. George, Utah, and he lives in New York with his family now, but he's one of the top paid artists of Utah. And you know, it's interesting, I had this discussion with my 2260 class, and they were feeling a little bit of discouragement that family members had conveyed to them that there wasn't any money in art, and to discourage their talents and to really focus on a different career path. And so part of the reason I put this together for you is to show you artists here in Utah that are making a very successful living. And what I encourage you to do is find out what you're passionate about. What are your strengths? Are you more interested in animation? Are you more interested in the fine arts, graphic design, illustration? Find out what your passion is, and then stay with it. Some people, to work in front of a computer all day is very challenging. And so I wanted to introduce you to a couple of local artists. Greg Mortensen, he not only does fine art for galleries, but he produces a whole range of art videos and art instruction. And Greg, he's a pretty young guy, and yet he's very, very successful and making an outstanding living. Not that that's the only goal, but this is Colleen Berry as well. I love how she conceived that drawing. This is Stephen Bauman. You're familiar with his work. I love this drawing. I think it has some really strong textural elements within the hair mass, but again, he's still interested in the actual value changes within that mass. So if you use more textural quality to your hair, make sure that you first conceive it as the whole mass and form in space. I think this is Colleen, and this is Colleen Berry. These are both smaller pieces. I love this piece. I have the original of this, and I just think this is just an exquisite drawing. Every mark to Colleen Berry matters. Every mark. So when you look at a drawing like this, you can see some of the aspects in here in the neck, and these are intentional marks. They're not just random accidents. She's thinking through that. This is the first artist that I showed you that did the drawing on Durafilm. This is Julio Reyes, and I believe he and his wife moved to Texas, Candace Bohannon, but I'm not positive. I think they're running an atelier down in Texas. I don't know what part. But I really love this. This works overall as a whole unit, but the individual parts of it are lovely to look at. Dr. Vern Swanson of the Springfield Museum of Art, he said that the rule in art is to take a 1-inch square, and if that is inviting to the viewer, then that's successful, because each part is so important to the overall whole concept, but not at the expense of the whole concept. So we really need to focus on making sure it works as a whole unit and is unified but that each area of the drawing is very beautiful. This is Colleen Berry again. You can see a very distinct style. These are some of her earlier drawings, but I love how she makes the hair mass in the ponytail and how that is so descriptive. And I'm not sure who did this one. I actually worked with this artist. Here's another one. That's Colleen Berry. That's Colleen Berry. And that's the artist herself. That's a self-portrait. She's heavily influenced by an artist by the name of Katie Kolowitz, and she just really loves her work. And this is very reminiscent of that artist. She was an artist, I believe, in World War II, and had her drawings really evoke a lot of pain and suffering. This is the artist Sabin Howard. He's known as a sculptor, so you can see how sculptural this drawing is. I love his stroke quality. I wanted to show you that I'm not trying to push one particular idea about tonal application, but I do want you to understand form and structure. There's another beautiful drawing. Again, I think that's just stunning. This is Colleen Berry. You can tell I like her work a lot. That's a drawing I did with Colleen Berry. And this is Amaya Gruppiti. And that's all I'm going to show you for today. Okay, so now I want to talk to you about these other concepts. And this will be a shorter portion of the demonstration. This is something that I keep seeing in drawings, and so I wanted to talk about it a little bit. The concept is foreshortening, and for some reason, someone has, if you're struggling with foreshortening, sometimes in your past instruction, someone has made that sound like a scary concept, and foreshortening is not. Foreshortening is correct drawing skills. It's no different than what you've been doing, but when you're actually using foreshortening, you have to think about the horizon line. So everything goes to the horizon line. So here we have eye level or horizon line. And that's an important concept. So you're either in 1 or 2 point perspective most often. You're going to sight your line of action. Now I've drawn a cylinder in 2 different ways. And the cylinder that we're looking at here this shows the full length of the cylinder. And what makes that a 3-dimensional form is this is 3-dimensional. This is not. This is 2-dimensional. And so what makes it 3-dimensional is adding in that ellipse. And a lot of times what I'm seeing is you're sighting this overall line of action here and not getting its length. So from here to here, this line continues out into space. And when a leg is foreshortened to you on the model stand, that's what's happening. So here's the inguinal fold. Oftentimes that's where we start that trajectory, and this line is trajecting out into space. So that's your line of action. So you're going to first sight the medial side of that line of action, and then you're going to get its length. Now it needs a 3rd point to get its length. So here is the length. Now I'm going to come back to this in just a second because I want to talk to you a little bit about triangulation. So I'll be coming back to foreshortening because to me they're very, they're almost companion-like in their understanding. So let me grab a pencil here, sorry, the hesitation. Okay, so triangulation takes place when you choose a form that has three distinct parts to the form that are stable. So you have to choose 3 points that are on a model that are not going to change. This would be the axial point, the suprasternal notch right here, that would be a good point. The closer together those points are, the better and more successful your triangulation is going to be. So the points, when you first set up your first 3, you want to create stable points. You want to create points that are on a T-turn. In other words, when one plane intersects another plane, that creates a T-turn or a section that you can use. The next thing that you want to look at is you want to make sure that those points are not going to change throughout the entire pose. And that's really important. So here's triangulation. These are not a series of triangles like this. That's not triangulation. Triangulation was developed in the 1400s. It was not a fine art technique. It was designed by the artist Descartes. And Descartes was a surveyor. He created roads. And so he was the originator of the current GPS system. And so he developed a way or a system of using 3 distinct points to determine something with 100% accuracy. And so when we choose these 3 points, they don't have to line up in a triangle. I can immediately see if a student does not understand triangulation because they start drawing triangles. And what this looks like, rather than triangles, is when it's used correctly, it helps refine your accuracy. So as far as the hierarchy of the drawing process, first we have our gesture. Then you measure into the gesture. You have the early block-in. And in the early block-in, you have point to point. That means you're looking around the form globally. I've had students ask me, well, why do I need to do triangulation? If I'm getting the accuracy, why do I have to add that extra step? You don't. You don't. So my main focus, in fact, at this stage in the drawing process, I rarely use a full-blown triangulation, although I'm thinking about it. So first off, we're using comparative measurement. Second, we're using shape. Okay? We're using perspective. And we're using anything that achieves visual accuracy. Okay? So a lot of you have developed visual acuity that helps you to start this drawing. But the drawing process is really clear. When you introduce triangulation, if you introduce triangulation, that's up to you. But the first 3 points are critical because they're your stable points. You don't change those at all through the drawing. So I've had students that start out with these 3 points up here and then think when they get to the foot that they don't use those. That's not true. You only have the first 3 points. You don't change those throughout the drawing. And everything relates back to it. So this point to this, you're going to sight draw, sight check. This point to this, sight draw, sight check. This point to this point, sight draw, sight check. And then you're going to add to that the next decision, and it's, where do you start out? Start out with the things that you understand most readily. So if I choose another 3rd point, a soft tissue landmark like the nipple point, all that comes back to the first 3 points. Now, can I look across the form and see this? Absolutely. Can I look and measure up to here? Yes, that's in point to point. How does that relate here? You're constantly thinking globally. So you're thinking about the entire space, not just in a small section of that space. So here's the base of the glabella. Go back to your first 3 points. The anterior spine of the septum, first 3 points. The midline of the mouth and where that mouth ends, first 3 points. Okay, so it starts to feel like here's the as is, sorry, I said as is, that's not correct. Here's this really important process called the AC process that we've talked about. And this AC process has got to go back to the first 3. So I'm measuring here to here, here to here, and here to here. I've already drawn in the clavicle, right? And I'm measuring as I get the back of the trapezius muscle. I'm looking at the shape that this creates right here because I'm thinking shape. So it's like juggling all of these concepts in your brain. And you're going back and you're measuring with this tool. And when you leave that tool is up to you. How much of it you do is up to you. But you have comparative measurement, shape, and perspective now that we're adding into this. Now, back to foreshortening. So when you use the cite the line of action, which is this line of action, I start on the medial side, or the side closest to the midline or center line. And then you've got to take a third point to measure its length. So as I am thinking about this, here's a major intersection, or right here in the inguinal fold. And I can use either one, either side. I need a third point to get accuracy. So this is how to use triangulation without doing all the linear work. So what we're thinking about is how is this point along this trajectory? It could be here, it could be here, it could be here. Where does this line up on this decision? And in the meantime, a really outstanding artist is going to see shape. Is this too long? Is it too narrow? So what is the shape right here that's created? How long is this in comparison to this? So you're using this line of action, using comparative measurement, using triangulation if you need to, and using 3 points to get final accuracy. But this important concept of shape tells you if that is correct. So you'll see very quickly in your drawing where if something is accurate or not. If not, change it. Our goal is that we continue in this process until it's 100% accurate. Now, once you get into value, you'll be able to see this even easier. Because right here, you'll have a form shadow edge on this trajectory. So this helps you to see the box as well, right in here. So here is the side plane of that box. And now when I look at that shape, it's easiest to understand that shape. See how that opens that up? And I can see very clearly, is this shape making sense? Now I've got a third ratio here to 2/3 here in the light zone. That helps me as well. So it's not just one thing that we're using to get our accuracy. But foreshortening, I want to give you the confidence to know that it's just a consequence of really good observation. And once you observe correctly, you're going to get the measurements correctly, and that helps you to draw more accurately. Okay, so that's the end of the lecture today. And now we'll have George with us today to model, so let's get started drawing.